Rats didn't kill the most villagers. Their own neighbors did, by sealing the sick inside cottages and nailing the doors shut to protect the street. It rarely worked, but the screams told everyone the quarantine was serious. Stick around, because the ways medieval folk dodged death get even darker and stranger before they start to look familiar. Mud-soaked lanes, wood smoke horizons, and a smell of rot thick enough to chew. That was everyday life long before the Black Death rolled in. Yet across Europe's ragtag hamlets, people somehow learned to tilt the odds, improvising cures out of terror, superstition, and the occasional flash of genuine insight. What follows is the unvarnished chronicle of how your average plow puller stared down invisible doom, armed with livestock, prayers, and an alarming willingness to experiment. They lit dung fires indoors because breathing acrid smoke felt safer than clean air that carried the miasma. One Wiltshire account describes parents piling horse manure onto the hearth until the rafters dripped brown condensate, children coughing so hard they vomited, yet mortality in that cottage skimmed below the parish average. Doctors later mumbled about organic phenols. The villagers just knew the stench seemed to chase death back into the night. But wait, it gets weirder. Families too poor for dung burned their own shoes, inhaling smoldering leather like desperate incense and boasting that the plague shunned houses where feet blistered even at midnight. Self-flagellants marched in, whipping bare backs until skin peeled, because pain was believed to entice divine mercy faster than prayer alone. Villagers joined not from piety, but mathematics. Entire rows of cottages spared after a procession meant bloodletting equaled survival odds. Chroniclers in Thuringia tallied a 30% drop in new infections the month after the traveling lash troop passed through. Nobody asked how many sick had simply died unseen on the road. Of course they did. Statistical hygiene wasn't invented yet. Still, for a peasant who'd already buried half his children, copying the traveling human storm looked downright evidence-based. They bartered for St. Chips, tiny bone slivers allegedly scraped off relics, because fragments of holiness might barricade a doorway where medicine could not. One Bavarian widow traded her only cow for a shard of St. Roch's knuckle, wired it to her lintel, and charged neighbors 2 pfennigs to rub it before meals. Parish records show livestock losses, but no fatalities on that farm during the autumn wave. Skeptics muttered coincidence. Believers lined up with cash, proving medieval capitalism never missed a plague-shaped opportunity. Whole villages voluntarily cut themselves off, posting armed sentries who turned back relatives at sword point. Long before Am's famous quarantine, a Corinthian hamlet called Oberbach shut its mule track, surviving on barley gruel and snowmelt while the valley below filled with carts of corpses. Starvation thinned them. Frostbite maimed them. Yet the tax rolls list the settlement intact after the epidemic. It was the harshest math. Add hunger, subtract contagion. Hope the ledger ends positive. Better lean than lifeless, the Reeve wrote in the margin, apparently with fingers too numb to hold quill straight. Urine became medicine when everything else failed. Physicians, those lucky enough to afford robes, swore by golden tincture, recommending patients drink the first morning stream to balance humors. Peasants improved on the recipe by steeping rusty nails in chamber pots, believing the iron added strength. Contemporary lab tests on preserved jars. Yes, archaeologists cracked one open, and no, you don't want that smell in your memory. Reveal enough ammonia to kill bacteria in vitro. Did guzzling it help? Records show a surprising cluster of recoveries in households that practiced what polite Latin texts labeled secretum flave. Sometimes the line between quackery and proto-science is one gag reflex away. They scapegoated whoever couldn't fight back. Midwives with bent backs, Jews with strange prayers, beggars who coughed at the wrong moment. all became outbreaks on legs. Lynching the vulnerable offered the living two luxuries: emotional anesthesia and the illusion of control. In 1349, Strasbourg executioners burned 2,000 Jews on a single February day, then posted guards along the riverbanks to stab corpses drifting downstream, so the infection would not return. Chronicles say without irony. 2 weeks later, the Christian quarter caught the same fever, proving prejudice kills answers faster than disease. Churchyards overflowed, so villagers stacked bodies like kindling in ossuaries, then threw feasts beside the bones to prove they were too alive to die. Archaeologists at Sedlec dug up goblets carved from skulls and spoons whittled out of femurs, mealtime reminders that tomorrow's utensils might be you. Morbid, yes. Effective morale booster? Apparently. Parish registers record a spike in baptisms 9 months after each Dance of Death banquet, suggesting grim gallows parties reignited hope the way no sermon could. Strangely, some cures were tasty. Garlic onion wine, stewed in pewter pots, demonstrated real antimicrobial punch. In Dijon, convent gardens grew entire rows of allium just for plague broth. A monk's notebook lists dosage: 2 ladles hourly until sweat smells of fields. Folk memory kept the recipe alive through centuries, and modern microbiologists admit the sulfur compounds stand up against certain pathogens. So amid all the nonsense, villagers occasionally nailed a working solution, then shrugged as if every kitchen brewed liquid penicillin. When things grew desperate, families melted coins and fashioned crude amulets, betting that precious metal might deter pestilence the way it supposedly repelled witchcraft. Gold rings were pressed into sores, leaving shimmering prints on skin soon blackened by septic blotches. A Sardinian chronicle gloats about hamlets, too poor for silver, succumbing faster. A medieval flex that sounds eerily like modern vaccine equity arguments. Yes, you read that correctly. Bragging about bling as a health strategy predates influencer culture by 700 years. Yet survival often hinged less on eccentric remedies than on ruthless logistics. Villagers rotated caretakers like sentries, limiting any one person's exposure to minutes. They invented proto-PPE, straw masks soaked in lavender oil, leather gloves hardened with wax, and eye slits stuffed with moss. These makeshift barriers lacked standards but blunted droplet spread. In Lubeck, a guild of coopers assigned 2 men weekly to corpse duty. Mortality among them ran high, but the rest of the guild held steady, proving organized sacrifice beats chaotic panic. Dark math, brighter outcome. Even at plague's height, kindness sneaked through. In alpine settlements, herders left baskets of cheese at crossroads so passing refugees could eat without approaching cottages. The practice, called das stille Brot, silent bread, surfaced again during later cholera bouts, an ancestral memory that generosity might pay future dividends when roles reversed. No saints recorded it, no bards sang it, yet the cheese kept people alive long enough to write thank you curses into tree bark. Small bleats of humanity amid the roar of oblivion. Eventually, winter frost or sheer random chance made each wave ebb. Survivors staggered out, blinking at emptier horizons. They rebuilt huts with wider windows to let sickness escape, started washing hands before meals, not from germ theory, simply because it couldn't hurt, and told stories about dung smoke, flagellant parades, and skull feasts that had somehow worked. The next generation rolled its eyes, adopted half the tricks, and waited for the next horror. Progress, medieval edition, was just remembering enough weird stuff to shave the death toll by a hair. So the next time modern pundits compare vaccine hesitancy to ancient ignorance, remember the villagers who turned manure into medicine, leather fumes into prophylaxis, and sheer communal grit into a survival strategy our antiseptic age still borrows from in crisis. Humanity's greatest legacy, it seems, is an unkillable talent for staying just barely ahead of whatever wants us gone.